We have now, in a couple of minutes, Zhenya Polosatova is going to talk to us about reflective practice. Okay, so she's gonna kind of expand a little on what Matt and Peter talked about earlier in teaching, what we should do, and adds a new dimension to what Simon's talking about, our own well-being. So anyway, before I just rumble on into nothingness, Zhenya joined ELT through International House in her native Ukraine, where she has worked as teacher, academic director, and in-service teacher trainer. Her teacher training partnership with SIT and World Learning started in 2007, and this has brought her on courses for new teachers and coaching new trainers in Tajikistan, Moldova, the United States, South Korea, Poland, Thailand, Myanmar, Lebanon, Turkey, Morocco, we're not finished, and Kuwait, all pre-COVID. And in addition to that, her other freelance projects include designing curriculum, facilitating online courses, co-organizing professional development events for colleagues, and blogging. Zhenya is an enthusiast of reflective practice groups and passionately promotes reflective teaching and thinking. And now it is 1:30. Zhenya, the floor is all yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you confirm?
Yes.
Excellent.
Hearing you loud and clear.
Okay. Hello, everybody. So good to see a lot of familiar names in the chat, and want to say hello to fellow Ukrainers, to my international colleagues worldwide, and good morning to the US side where the day is starting. I'm so grateful that you people stayed till the end of this fruitful and intensive day of learning and reflecting. And it's fantastic how Simon built a bridge to our last session, because we already are talking about what we've learned as a result of today's sessions, thoughts, presentations. So as Kanduk kindly introduced me, you understand that I am one of those freelance teacher trainers who identify with a variety of different roles, like at school as a manager in the past, and then as a teacher trainer on a variety of projects, as well as someone working at non-training, non-teaching projects. And I think reflection is something that links and glues all these together. And that's why I'm so passionate about this topic, and I hope to share it with you. Now, if I ask you to think about reflection or reflective practice in simple words, that would be probably a challenging task, right? You can try doing that in the chat really briefly. Reflection, reflective practice in simple words. Thinking over, looking back. Take stock. Thinking about action, okay, as opposed to action. Evaluating, yeah. Analyzing, improving, so a lot of ideas. Vision towards new ideas, so bridge to the future. Critically analyzing, examining, so a lot of verbs that show the depth of it, thinking what we've learned. So in preparation for this session, I started conversations with fellow trainers and had a little survey asking for their ideas and input. And the people who responded, there were about 30 of them, were and are people who practice reflection quite a lot in their training and teaching. Even though they are so passionate about reflection, you can see how differently the term is perceived, right? Like there's no simple definition of this idea, even though it's been around for the last couple of decades. And a lot of us do reflection, and a lot of us also think how to add and incorporate reflection into the training courses that we do. And my next question was if people see any obstacles or challenges in introducing and developing reflective skill with the teachers on the courses. So we can see that there are quite a few challenges that are there, and I tried to code them slightly to make you curious. So, for example, the clock introduces the time. Like people complain that, look, there's so much to do on an intensive course, and reflection is an extra skill which can probably be sacrificed for others, like teaching activities and other things. I'm saying resistance to the usefulness of the practice. Yes, rejecting it and just sort of saying no, because for a number of reasons, having a different understanding of reflection, having difficult previous experience of what was called reflection but wasn't, probably. Culture awareness, someone says, and that's probably because you can see my little globe. Yeah, the culture you are teaching at and the culture you're from has a big impact, and some cultures are more sensitive towards reflecting in public, let's say, especially about thinking back on something that wasn't as wonderful as you had imagined. And we're not talking about perfect or ideal, correct lesson. We're talking about something that we imagined in a different way. And so curriculum oftentimes doesn't offer any space for reflection, or doesn't offer any specific guidance of what that is and how to structure it. And also depending on what kind of teachers join the courses, and in the case when the teachers are very experienced already, and I'm talking not just about a 4-week intensive course for beginning teachers, and sometimes in the context where I am based, teachers come to Cambridge courses, for example, with quite a lot of experience under their belt. And oftentimes it's a relevant experience, communicative experience, and people would like to be validated and to have a certificate as an appreciation of that. And in this case, the beliefs and practices are very dear to them, and it's sometimes hard to just leave them behind and start something new and reflect or assess, evaluate that. Teachers' workload, exactly, and that's relevant for those of us working with teacher training in the organization, language school, for example, where, and I think it was mentioned today in the session by Peter and Matt, that if there are 6 lessons a day and a lot of writing to grade, it's very hard to find a little bit of time to sit down and reflect, and it seems to be as an extra burden on people. So sometimes it's not a genuine kind of reflection, so that's where the theater is. Like, it's a little bit of a, let me just go through the form, fill out the form about the points that worked and didn't work, etc. And sometimes behind all those obstacles and challenges, we lose the wood itself, right? Like, we don't see it for the trees because we forget that it's one of the key competencies for teachers and perhaps trainers, and we'll talk about that a little more. So yeah, critical, holistic lens. Yes, that's where the cognitive and the emotional come together and unite the brain and the heart. Thank you for the comment. So in my teaching and in my training career, I was fortunate. I have been very lucky, I think, to work and to have my training license with the School for International Training, or SIT Graduate Institute in the US. And it's the school has a very well-established and well-known in the US Masters of Arts in Teaching program that's been around since 1967. And 30 years later, in 1997, the ideas from that from this master's degree were condensed, distilled into a 4-week intensive course for teachers who were not perhaps ready for taking the whole degree, or for people who were changing careers and wanted to try themselves in teaching. So in this case, the SIT TESOL certificate course is kind of unique in our field because it's based on an existing master's program. And that master's program is based on the humanistic approach, and the idea of experiential learning and reflective practice is a core built-in principle and structure of the course. That's how I think I'm very lucky. And the way reflection is seen and in the courses I'm working on, I'm referring to the course, but I think the ideas on the practices that I'll be talking about will be relevant not just to our courses, but to trainers in different contexts. So one of the premises is that we are learning from the professional or personal experience that we are going through. And in the session about structuring our training sessions, there was a reference to personal experience as our personal views on teaching and beliefs, right? In this sense, I'm using it as a little bit wider notion for anything that can happen with us, like any occurrence, any event that we feel is meaningful and important and relevant. It can be traveling experience, it can be seeing a piece of art in a museum. It can be an event which is completely non-ELT related, like in this case, it was my experience of running online and taking part in the race online. And the medal is not because I won the race. So in any case, the experiences that we are going through are, they can be reflected on, they can be learned from. And we can structure this kind of thinking with the stages. And if we are disciplined enough to help ourselves to go through those stages, then we can see a valuable learning from it. Like, the pictures in the session will be from my personal archive from different traveling experience and other experiences. So, but what exactly do I mean by this? Let's take today. The day started several hours ago, and it was a huge learning experience to me. I was an attendee at a conference, and if you're like me, you have a lot of ideas. I don't know if you can see my little notebook full of different notes and points to consider and reflect on. And as I said, there are several stages which help us reflect in a structured and disciplined way. And instead of me explaining and going through the stages now, let me just show you a quick example of a reflection that I have on one of the things I saw today. I have more, but I'd like to talk about one of them. So in the session right before me, it was Simon, and he talked about well-being. And in his slides, I noticed there was a glass of water, if I'm not mistaken, was used a couple times. And later it was a glass of orange juice, something orange, looks like orange. The glass was half filled with water, 50%. And in one of the slides at the beginning, it was like lying on the surface with the water spilled. And in later slide, it was standing, and it was in a different part of the slide. Okay. I personally felt really curious about the glass point, as Simon promised that he will come back to that later, and I was waiting for that. And that curiosity made me actually forget that I'm the following presenter, and I stopped reciting my own notes, and I listened with my full attention, and I tried to connect the metaphor to what was going on in the session. And there was a lot to learn from, which reminds me how much I value metaphors in teaching and training and in slide making. And I realized how important an element of curiosity to me as a learner, and possibly to other people who are listening as well. So in my future slide preparation, I'll try to incorporate a little nonverbal metaphorical image to make people curious. Okay. So what have we just done? It was a little bit of description, yeah, what I was talking, where the slide was, where the little glass of water was. Then I talked about the meaning it had for me, my own interpretation of it. It may not be exactly what the presenter meant, but that's my kind of little reflection on it, right? And then I formulated my little generalization or conceptualization, I could say it from the first time, about the value of nonverbal images and metaphors. And I made a little promise, which is now very public, right? Because you're all listening to me. Can you signal me in the chat if this is okay and this is something you understand? Something that's just yes or no? Thank you, Kanduk. Thank you very much. Great. It was an important point to check in with you so that we could continue. Okay. So I was kind of keeping you away from the ELT. Yes, ELC, Brahim, thank you for saying it. Experiential learning cycle. I was keeping you away from the training experience or teaching classroom experience for a reason, because now I have a question to you. So as teacher educators, as trainers, where do you think this cycle is possible to be used at a training course? So in the next slide, I'll show you a couple of ideas. And in the chat, you will just tell me the numbers you think will fit into this question, okay? So where in a training course can this skill be practiced? Give me numbers in the chat. 2, 3, 4, okay. 1, yeah. 3, 4, 6, excellent. 1. A lot of people go for the post-lesson feedback. Number 4, 1. Patrick said all of them. Nelson, yeah, maybe. So people are reading till the end. So possibly all of them. Okay, so yes, all of them is the right answer. And the right answer here means for the course I'm talking about. As I said, I'm fortunate to have had experience with as a trainer and as a trainer of trainers. And if we look at number 8, because it's structured into the course design itself, right? Because it has modules built on this principle, and because it is number 6 saying incorporated reflective practice into the formal assessment in the course, it is possible, right? So it's explicitly shown to the people. And as you imagine, like if we take standard 4 week, which is pre-COVID kind of standard, now it's a bit longer. We have lots of explicit examples of people going through the cycle at a variety of occasions. Yes, a lot of that is happening in the post-lesson feedback time, or as we like to refer to it on our course as a guided reflection session. Yeah, so as a quick illustration, in the next slide, you can see how it's formulated in the assessment part, so that each participant had a participant record book. I think people who are PSELTers or who did SIT TESOL certificate recognize this little write out. And the same competencies written out for the trainer being trained. So, and the little bell shows that you're actually not receiving the license if you're not demonstrating the skill consistently during the course. So that's something that needs to be done in our courses. So it's kind of imposed or forced in a joking way. So zooming, I'm just showing this as an illustration because it's not something to be shared as an example. It's from the specific programs. Now, one way, and then now we get to the more practical part of this session. So one way to do it, and this is a picture of our session in Q8, that was the last training course in 2020, which was still face-to-face. You can use it in a post-session reflection time, and it can be quite participant-centered. They can be in smaller groups. And the activity that you see now is basically them matching the questions, and the questions are on the slide, according to the stages. And at the point of matching, they don't know that the color coding takes place, so that's a pleasant surprise at the end. So the green questions are for helping them describe what was happening, and the yellow one for the interpretation, and then the red ones for generalizations to be made. and then the action plans there. Miss those days, says Hande. Thank you for saying it. Yay. The idea that here is that people can be scaffolded towards better and more confident understanding of what reflection is, and at the same time to help each other to do the guidance. So it's not only the trainer who is trying to push the reflective questions, but it's very clear to the people who practice it in the course. And because it happens daily, the reflection time itself. I'm not sure what's the audio. Do you mean that you don't hear me well, Basandra? Okay. Using color can be used in a variety of ways. So these are pictures from some courses, and I think people recognize them. It can be on the board, it can be as a poster on a wall, it can be on a classroom. It can be on the whiteboard. It can be used with a variety of little playful things. I think participants from Lebanon and Morocco remember little wooden sticks, you know, those counting sticks that you can get in the stationery store, which you can use to prompt reflection. And I even have here colorful markers, which I can just show to the person talking to remind that it's a description stage and not to mix with the other two stages, etc. So there is a lot of fun and pleasant creativity that we can use about reflection, and it doesn't have to be daunting and serious during the course, even though it's quite an cognitively demanding skill. As I promised, in the trainer survey, there were a lot of other ideas from colleagues, and I'll give you a quiet time just to read and see if all of them sound interesting, something to try on in your future sessions. I like number 6, says Patrick. Yeah, which is a good bridge into the new online remote teach training reality, right? Number 4 from my colleague Rasha from Lebanon is really powerful, especially for more experienced teachers who may be more resistant towards just labeling something as right or wrong, and seeing the different sides in the same moment in the lesson, in the same activity, can be really enlightening and inspiring to them. And modeling sample reflective essays is an important part, because our course has several, they're called extended reflection papers, where teachers take a part of the lesson and go through very rigorous and detailed cycle. And having samples is really helpful because they can see the variety of styles. I like number 3, and I'm the honest one to give reflection about myself. Yes. And that's also like 3 and 5 are connected to that. As trainers, we need to be able to actually model and show this skill. And we need to be honest. It's not something that we can rehearse before the session and then pretend that we are reflecting. And I think the most powerful moments are when you're really reflecting on something that didn't work, either in the session or the lesson. And we show that we are human, vulnerable, that we are learning from this action. And I think it's a huge advantage if we can do that. It's not easy. It's not always pleasant. Yeah. So we need to do what we preach, or stop preaching, right? Yay. So the question now, especially like after more than a year of being online as trainers for many of us, is it possible to translate some of these practices into the online reality? Can you say yes or no? yeah, I see yeses. Sure. And I'm someone who hasn't, I'm honest with you, I'm not someone who has delivered full-time courses online up to this point. But to compensate for that, I asked my colleagues, my fellow trainers who have been doing this a lot lately. So my own experience online is asynchronous teaching, training, and that's a different story, which started pre-COVID. Yeah, some of them may be difficult without a video recording. It's a good comment, Patrick, before we move on. At the same time, we are often learning to pay attention in action, as Donald Sean say. Yeah, like we are helping teachers and we're also practicing that skill to pay attention to what's going on so that we could describe later. And that's not an easy skill, not a quick skill to acquire, but definitely possible with practice. So about online, there are again several ideas of what can be done to practice reflection with the help of the experiential learning cycle in different ways. Give you some time to read. Can you comment again in the chat if these look familiar, something that you tried doing, something that you would like to do? Number 2. Yeah, it actually looks quite doable and easy, right? With everyone being able to share a screen. And in a face-to-face course, that's harder because you have to have it up on the projector, and you may be thinking how to edit or not to edit your notes. But now we can just show a part of that. Yeah, putting yourself in the shoes of the learners, in the place of the learners. And that's very possible when you have your recording, or not the whole lesson recording, but if you can have a slice of it, right? And watch it with a specific task. Burak says I do number 4 quite a lot to make adjustments in my presentation. Yeah, I think the new normal, if I may say so, is a lot of recording being made. And sometimes the question is like, what is done with those recordings? And I think for reflective practice, it's a fantastic resource that we can use. And I think a lot of this will stay till the time of any return face-to-face, which may happen. And it will be huge material to work with. Transcription criteria for the analysis. So transcription criteria can be a separate probably topic or talk, but if we put it into simple words, and that's number 6 here in the list, we don't need to transcribe everything that happened. That's a huge task, right? Like you can spend hours transcribing 10-minute piece, but if you transcribe 1 or 2 minutes of everything that everyone said at that moment, it can be very interesting to analyze. And that's the idea I learned from John Fencelow's course at ITDI, and that's based on his book. I'll edit in the references, Small Changes in Teaching, Big Results in Learning. And that's his idea, that try it for 1 or 2 minutes, and you will have about an A4 piece of paper with the exact wording of what happened in the lesson. And that analysis, that reflection can be really, really powerful. You don't need to do it with someone else, but it can be a nice exercise, which we tried in the course. Yeah, breakout rooms where they discuss and reflect. Yeah, totally. So any small group work is easily moved into breakout rooms, and in that case, trainer can monitor and sometimes step back, right, and let them reflect on their own. And I think it's a lot about trusting participants to do a lot by themselves. And students' interaction during the class can be an indicator, is some said. Exactly. And a lot of lenses can be used for this kind of reflection. Like in the yellow part, in the interpretation, you can look at student interaction, you can look at trainer talk, teacher talk, you can look at apps and tools being used and helping students or not helping students, or a lot of different ideas. Andrei says self-recording. Yeah, I think self-recording is happening oftentimes, and I know a lot of organizations demand people to record themselves, and that can be true for practice teaching, but that can also be used as a tool, as a voluntary tool, to be a little researcher of your own practice, in this case. Something that's not on the list, but something that was mentioned in a conversation with a fellow trainer, how easy it is now to get feedback from students on each lesson. A teacher at a practice teaching can just offer a small Google Doc and ask, like exit tickets, yeah, in a face-to-face, asking to share impressions, learning challenges from the course, which then becomes a like nice material for description, interpretation, and learning theories formulation. So a lot of possibilities if we look at it. And asynchronous course, that's where like I've been often working at the moment with the open courses, former American e-teacher programs. They are solely on asynchronous. They are 8-week courses where we never meet live. We're all in different time zones, and teachers sometimes have very low internet connectivity. So it's not like, it's not even like what we're doing now, right, with the live sessions. But what's interesting, we noticed how this asynchronous format gives space to sit down and reflect. And with guidance and with structure, it actually shows quite interesting results and outcomes, even though we don't often see the lessons that happened. How about creating an online reflection forms to be feedbacked for learners? That's wonderful to learners. And that can be an actually different session as a course for teachers, because possibly that's a skill that we will need post-course, right? Like to have relationship with your students and to find out how to improve, how to serve their needs better. And chat box, yeah. So there's a lot of opportunity for reflection online. And actually, the more I read this list, the more I want to deliver a course online, which I hope coming soon this year. Let's look at another side of, do you think teaching have become more professionalized with distance learning? Rania is asking, oh, it depends on the teacher. And I think it's a big question to think about. I think maybe I'm wrong, but maybe it's now too early to make conclusions about like better or worse, because we are still in the process. And for many of us, it's still not a question of choice to be online, but a question of necessity. So we'll see life will show us. Meanwhile, still being trainers, and for now we've been talking about reflective practice for teachers and with teachers. But I think you will agree that in order to offer this kind of reflective practice competency and help teachers develop it, we trainers need to have it at a mastery level, right? We need to be very confident reflective practitioners. And my theory is that we actually need to practice it beyond courses and between courses in a similar kind of depth as we want our teachers to demonstrate. So here are a couple of ways we can do, or I do, between courses and projects to keep my reflective muscle toned, so to say, and to keep the skill up. And I'm curious if you as teacher educators are also doing any of these. 7 seems to be my magic number today. Sometimes 5 and 6. And 5, Brahim says, right? 5 is conversation. And by conversations here, I mean sharing experiences with people who also share the same sort of belief and skill set with reflection. Because conversations can be they can be different, right? We can just complain about life, we can share stories, but if we talk with someone who also is aware and appreciative of the cycle, these conversations can be very interesting. I think if someone overheard our trainer talk at SIT, they will be surprised to actually hear, can you give me some description, as a non-course conversation. And having a fellow trainer, it's fantastic for having deeper interpretation, like multiple perspectives at different issues. All right, 3, 5, 7, okay, 5 and 6. So nobody mentioned reflective, Magdalena mentioned reflective practice groups, and that's something that I've been really grateful to participate in first. I think I attended it first in South Korea, and I was amazed at how simple and wonderful the idea is to have monthly meetings where people come and talk about their challenges, struggles, victories, and insights. And then we had I almost used the past simple. We had a practice group in Dnipro in Ukraine, but we paused for the pandemic time, and I hope we will be back to it at some point. And I'm also participating in an online reflective practice group for the last 2 years. And that's, I think it's really powerful way to have reflections at trainer level. And I think we can also look at number 4, collaborating with professional learning network. And if I'm not mistaken, there is an IATEFL SIG group where people can, Facebook group, right, where people can join in and share their reflections. Please, Matt, if you can confirm that's true, so that I'm not imagining. I am not a member, unfortunately, but I hope to join. And there's also something called the Celta Chat on Twitter, where I think it's once a month event where people share different learnings, questions, struggles connected with training. Social media reflection group is actually really possible, sure, as Abdelaziz says, and it's again, from the recent conversations with trainers, we noticed it's much easier now to sit down and talk with a colleague, one in Ukraine, one in Ecuador, the other in Turkey, and to have a conversation about an issue or an interesting thing, an observation. We talked about online reflection with my colleague for a couple hours earlier this week, and a lot of things. Test driving a session can be fun, especially if you are designing something from scratch, and if you are a freelancer like me, you may be lonely sometimes, and you don't know, like, what if those ideas in your head are just ideas that don't make sense. So you can try it out with trainers. You can start larger conversations about reflective practice, which may be quite interesting, because I'm now doing a monologue kind of idea about the importance of the reflective dialogue, right? So that's, but again, different formats, different purposes. Any burning questions at this point about anything here? Trainer kind of reflection. Yeah, Victoria says, how different would training courses be? Yeah, I think our training courses are different, right? Like, we are who we teach. There is a saying, there is a quote from, I think, Patrice Palmer, but I think it's also, we are who we train, and we train who we are. And we bring a lot of our own beliefs, and not only professional beliefs, but also like our identity into the courses that we create. What does it mean by reflective practice? In which levels? I'm not sure I understood the question. Maybe a little bit of rewording. Parents' reflection. Do you consider parents' reflection survey? Parents of students, probably you mean, right? I think it really does depend on the context. If you're teacher training in the context where you work with younger learners, then you definitely, and it depends how young the learners are. Maybe they're not writing yet, right? Like preschoolers or primary school. So that's a possibility. Teacher well-being has to be included in the part of absolutely yes, absolutely yes. And I think it was already mentioned by Simon in his session that there are a lot of things to take care about, and they're non-training, non-ELT parts of our life. And I think it's also important to be very honest to ourselves and to sometimes say, no, I don't want to do any reflection today because I need a couple of hours of sleep. And I think it's important to address this. Besides, before we make any conclusions about online being better or worse, I think what we need to remember at this point is that it's oftentimes forced online training for us, not a choice. So a lot of space in our head and our working schedule is occupied with learning how to do it, figuring out how to help participants in this context. So it's difficult to only focus on reflection. Okay. We're good with the time, I think, and I'd like to make a little wrap up, and then we'll have a bit of Q&A time. So this session, as I said, it's a little lecture about reflection, but I hope it was a little bit of appetite whetting for the future practices, for the future courses you either create or facilitate in your context. And while it's nearly impossible to offer knowledge and profound knowledge and skill of reflection in a session of 45 minutes, I hope that you are a little bit more aware of what that can be, and maybe you have more excited, curious attitudes to try it out in the future. So for A here, we have attitude, awareness. We have quoting Carol Rogers' book, The Art of Reflective Teaching. We have being reflective means being learning, and being learning means being a human, right? And learning and being in the experience means being active, awake, alert, aware, and in the end, we can contribute to becoming more autonomous thinkers and more active as humans, as citizens, as people in the world. So while we can't force a horse to drink, we could try and make it thirsty, as one of my colleagues at SIT would be saying. So that's pretty much it from me. There are a couple of resources that I highly recommend because they are inspiring and profound, and because they also show different ways to reflect. It's not just the cycle in this particular iteration that can be used. I blog a little bit, as maybe you know, and this QR code will bring you to a link where I added a couple more ideas on this. I added one more example in case you were curious about that running medal. And also I will add more over the weekend next week. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Zhenya, and thank you so much to all our participants who are here and who've actively contributed to the chat. Whenever Zhenya had a question, we had some ideas. Zhenya, I'm going to go straight into the first question for you. I picked it up because I found it so interesting. We have a question that came in actually through the chat from Palin. She wrote, some teacher candidates do not want to hear the points that they should improve. What would your suggestions be to the teacher candidates for their gaining reflection culture? So, yeah.
Thank you for the Palin. Yeah, thank you for this fantastic question. I think understanding reflection as only points to be improved, that's a little bit limiting, and that's probably one reason why some teachers resist. Like, I think if we start from description of a specific item, if we encourage teachers to describe, we will find out what they would like to talk about in their teaching. I'm not trying to be an idealist. I've seen teachers who simply said no to reflection, but in most cases, teachers become more open-minded when they see that it's not just finding their mistakes in teaching. And as soon as they understand that there are more than one answer to probably anything in teaching, I think they become much more open, talking about their beliefs, talking why they don't want to reflect. Maybe there was a painful teacher training experience in the past, who knows? Thank you for this question.
Thank you, Zhenya, for that answer. We have another one. Somebody asked whether there's a danger of reflection also becoming a routine activity if it's done out of compulsion or if it's overdone. What are your thoughts on this?
I think anything that's done, that's forced, that's done under pressure, loses its value. And I think that's maybe the link to the trainer reflective skills. I think we as educators need to notice that moment when it's too much, and we can. I've had courses, I've had situations when I simply ask, do you want to talk about it now or not, or later? And it's okay not to talk about something for now. I think I personally separate feedback on a lesson from reflection. I've seen, we've had conversations about different beliefs at this point, like whether or not I have to give my feedback to the person no matter what, or is there a space for that other opinion to be voiced? So sometimes it's okay not to reflect immediately. Sometimes it can happen the next morning. So it depends.
Yeah, someone in the chat wrote, yeah, make them want to actually talk about it. If they want to, then that works. We have another question. Someone's asked how we assess, or is there any way to assess a person's ability to reflect?
Yeah, I touched it partially. So in the courses I'm mainly referring to, we have reflective competency area as along with teaching area and the lesson planning area. So there are criteria written out, and participants know these criteria from the very beginning. And there are also written reflective assignments where their particular reflective skills are being assessed and evaluated. And that's kind of a thread throughout the course, along with planning and teaching. So if it's structured that way, it's much easier to do. If it's not, then it's a little puzzle to solve, like how to inspire people to want that.
Thank you. We have one question that I hope you can answer really quickly and easily. The fruit in the slides, someone asked, and I'm curious too. Does it have a meaning?
Okay, yeah. Thank you for someone who is so attentive. So there was a little pear in one of the slides, right? There was a little
further earlier
apple.
than that.
Yeah, so that contributed to our little fruit salad, which is very good for your health as well as reflective practice.
Okay, it is, we are here at 1:15. I do have one last question, if you don't mind. A really interesting question from Pipit. Pipit asks, how can student teachers reflect on their teaching practice when their knowledge and experience is limited? And to what extent can the reflection go? So how far can the reflection go with this limited knowledge?
I think we are all limited to what we know or what we don't know. And the beginner teachers, even though they don't have all the theory, like and who has all the theory, they still need to make their first steps in the classroom, and that's what I think is important to respect and to support. And it doesn't. I think I'm not trying to cross all the learning that can come from the research and theory. I think as any as we look at the elementary levels of language teaching, right? They don't know everything, but they can work on something they know and see how it can be applied to their teaching style, teaching context. They can later read a book, they can listen to their educator, take more input, plan action for the future, and make the next lesson better. So that's how the cycle is not a circle, but a kind of cycle going upwards. I don't know if I was able to answer that question.
No, I think that's really well answered. Thank you.